Okay. We should have audio now. So I guess every time I start Be Live, their platform keeps changing. It's hard to keep up, but I'm learning. So this is the second Come At Me Bro. And I thought for sure I was going to get different kind of questions because I kind of hinted that I would answer any kind of question that anybody asked me, hoping that we'd get some of those off-topic type questions. But the questions have been pretty straightforward and easy to answer. I got my first relationship question last week, which I was really excited about because I do think a lot about relationships in general. So I have plenty of opinions. We should have audio out there now. If you are watching live, I'd appreciate it if you would just let me know if you have audio now. So I'm not talking to myself again. But we have some good questions. Several people asked questions ahead of time because they knew they wouldn't be here live, and I appreciate that. We're going to get those questions answered first and foremost. Actually, I'm going to start putting them up here. The first one was actually from, okay, sounds good. Thank you. Somebody just said that. Looks like it might be Elisa, for all I know. This question came from Rebecca Schmidt, and it was actually something that we discussed on Facebook. And I thought it was interesting. And so I asked her if it was okay if I used it on today's show, and she said yes. So she said to the group that we're in, I'm writing because I hope I'm not the only one ever to experience this. I go through bouts of anxiety and panic attacks. Recently, one hit me post-workout. Sorry, I got to make sure the music is off. Which therefore gave me anxiety. That gave me anxiety. Due to elevated heart rate, mimicking anxiety, which therefore gave me anxiety. Since this event, I've found my resting heart rate elevated, but only when I'm paying attention to it. Go figure. I know I'm healthy, or at least I believe so, but I'm looking for some advice on getting past this hurdle so I don't continue to jeopardize my workouts in my head. And thanks in advance for any answers. And so she and I kind of went back and forth on this one, and I think that she found a little, let's say, hope in my response to it. And that was, I asked her if she's ever checked her blood sugar levels, first of all. Quite often, these problems about anxiety are related to blood sugar, very, very often, actually. And as a result of that, people just don't get it. When your blood sugar drops, which it can do after a heavy training session, you really do feel anxious. And that type of post-workout hypoglycemia is really something that gets a lot of people freaked out. It's natural for you to be hypoglycemic after a heavy training session, right? Especially if you're not using pre-workout carbs or eating before working out, and you're not metabolically flexible, where your body can start to produce ketones and also run fatty acids into the mitochondria and burn those. So it's that right there was a telltale sign to me that it could be that she is experiencing hypoglycemia. So I recommended that she get herself a glucometer. Hey, John Peaks, man, he's in New Mexico on the road again. I recommended that she get herself a glucometer and check her blood sugar when she feels anxious and see if it's actually dipping, because that could be the first sign of a problem. But there's other things here that are suspicious to me. When you are that high strung that just paying attention to your heart makes it race, this is a completely other problem that I really didn't address with her. She's got parasympathetic sympathetic imbalance. I mean, she's really, if you're somebody who pays attention to your heart and that automatically makes your heart race, you are really high strung. you're wound just a little bit too tight. And as a result of that, just paying attention to your heart can give you anxiety. These people tend to also be what are known as white coat syndrome responders. When they go into their doctor to have their blood pressure tested, quite often their blood pressure rises the first couple tests, and the doctor usually knows this about the patient. It'll be like, oh, we got to test you 3 or 4 times before we get the real reading, because you get all anxiety driven just knowing you're getting your blood pressure tested and your blood pressure goes up. These are people who are just wound too tight. Albert Woody makes a great point. Less caffeine and more sleep. Definitely less caffeine, excuse me. I can't agree more with you about this. And look, man, I raise my hand, right? So many of us have become so well adjusted with the idea that we're using 400 and 500 milligrams of caffeine anhydrous a day. And that's a lot of caffeine. And, it's become almost accepted, because a lot of these cups of coffee today from boutique coffee shops, one cup of coffee has 220, 280 grams of milligrams of caffeine. So the idea of somebody, drinking down a couple Red Bulls and a 5-hour energy and a pre-workout before, and at the end of the day, they're like 600 milligrams into caffeine. We have to be stupid to think that that's not doing something to us, to this whole sympathetic, parasympathetic overdrive phenomenon. And Albert Woody's right. I mean, so many of us don't even know what it feels like to be relaxed anymore. Hey, I'm one of them. I'm supposed to be meditating. It's on my list of things to do every day. It's been on my list of things to do since we came back from Michigan, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I haven't meditated once. So I'm not preaching. I'm here to learn too. And I agree. I think that most of us are just a little wound too tight. So I would still ask her to look at her blood sugar. I think that there's something to that. Okay, so the next question comes from Doug Salamone. And Doug is actually a guy who is in the podcast industry. He's actually helped me with some things. He listened to the rerun that I did this week of the show I originally did in 2007, claiming that melatonin was the greatest anti-aging supplement for pennies a day. In 2007, I came to that conclusion. A study was just published recently that shows that melatonin may ward off aging by an effect on the mitochondria that closes up holes in the mitochondria. These holes allow energy to escape, and they make the mitochondria less efficient. They make the mitochondria dysfunctional. And melatonin actually closes these holes up and allows the mitochondria to function more economically. And that this mitochondrial preservation, because apoptosis takes longer when the mitochondria is preserved better, actually aids you in aging better. And so Doug Salamone writes, wow, I periodically take melatonin, but after this episode, I think I'm not taking it often enough and in high enough doses. Also, I never heard of taking L-tryptophan in the morning. That's right. That Dr. Russell Ritter, who really is the godfather of the pineal gland. He's authored over 600 studies on the pineal gland and melatonin. He was the one who shared with us that we should take tryptophan in the morning to actually establish this circadian rhythm. I forgot all about that until Doug mentioned it. And then he goes on to say, how about combining a stack of melatonin, magnesium, and GABA to improve sleep quality? Also, what about taking 5 milligrams of fast and 5 milligrams of slow release melatonin? I'm really struggling with falling asleep at night. It's not unusual for me to finally fall asleep at sunrise. I think my circadian rhythm has been reversed. For example, I was out running around the neighborhood with my dog last night at 2 a.m. with no feeling of tiredness, and I really need to get this under control. So let's look at this and answer it in a few different stages. First of all, the jury is still out on GABA for me. I think that GABA seems to be in every single sleep aid because it is said to be a neurotransmitter inhibitor, so therefore it calms. But there is evidence that GABA stimulates some things too. So GABA is one of those amino acids that it's just not only this way, it's also that way. I think that GABA works in very low doses, like a gram. I think if you're taking 5 grams a night because you want to see a 5-fold increase in growth hormone, you may not sleep as well. You may fall asleep, but you may not stay asleep with GABA. Magnesium, melatonin, I think that that's fine. I have used your approach, combining fast and slow. It does work. One gets you to sleep, one keeps you asleep. But I would ask, and you know, Doug, this may be something that you're already doing, so I'm naive. It doesn't say it. I'm going to ask the question. But, you know, do you use blue blocker sunglasses at night when you are working on your computer? Dr. Jeff is in the house. Yes. What's up, brother? I cannot tell you the number of people who followed this advice and told me that they literally get tired and go to bed now, as opposed to going to bed and waiting to get tired. Putting on a cheap pair of blue blockers. Andy Mant now has a pair that's stylish and inexpensive. You can always go to Amazon.com and buy the Uvex, the ones that everybody's using. Elisa and I use them too. The Uvex blue blockers, they're like $8 a pair. The nice thing about the Uvex too is that they're safety glasses, so you can wear your prescription glasses under them and watch television or work on your computer. But if you put a pair of blue blockers on 3 hours before bedtime, so if you want to be in bed at 9, you put them on at 6. If you want to be in bed at 10, you put them on at 7. If you, and John Peaks and I had this conversation. Well, I'm going to bring this up in a second, John, because you're somebody that I actually talked to over the phone and we talked about this. I'm going to talk about your situation too, because it's going to be interesting. If you wear those blue blockers before bedtime, I guarantee you will be tired and you will fall asleep. And if you use the 5 and 5 slow and fast melatonin, you will fall asleep and you will stay asleep. You can add some GABA to it if you want. Absolutely. You can add some magnesium to it if you want. Absolutely. But I think the real magic for you would be to experiment with the blue blockers. So John Peaks is an over-the-road truck driver who tries to live the superhuman lifestyle while going to sleep in one city and waking up in another, not having access to food periodically. And also he has a partner, so they drive shifts. So one guy sleeps and one guy drives. I think you still do that, John. Maybe you don't. So sometimes you got to get in the back of the sleeper in the middle of the day and go to sleep. And John was struggling. You know, his training was failing and he wasn't feeling good. And so we had a discussion. He reached out to me. This is many months ago. And we had a discussion. And I told him the same things I'm telling everybody right now. Blue blockers on, melatonin when it's time to go to sleep, even if it's in the daytime. You know, try to protect your circadian rhythm as much as possible. We also talked about something else that I'm going to mention. If you do sincerely believe that you have a flipped circadian rhythm, the way to right it is not only to take melatonin at night, but to take something that spikes cortisol in the morning. If you want to go for something that absolutely, positively will spike cortisol in the morning, it's 125 micrograms of GHRP6, which will also give you a growth hormone spike, but it also spikes cortisol. So you could use a shot early in the morning of GHRP6, 125 micrograms, 150 max. For women, 50 to 100. You could take that first thing in the morning, and that will create a pulse of cortisol. So now you've got the morning set up with the cortisol rise, and at night you have the melatonin rise because they're reciprocals of each other. you can actually reestablish circadian rhythm by using this approach. And if you use blue blockers to keep artificial light from telling your body that it's still daytime when it's 10 o'clock and you're going to bed now because you've been watching TV or working on your iPhone or something like that, you can correct a flipped circadian rhythm. Another thing that you could do in the morning is licorice root, but not too much because that can raise your blood pressure. But that will also cause a spike in cortisol. I'm trying to think what other supplements you could use. I mean, you could get a 2.5 milligram tab of hydrocortisone from your doctor and take that first thing in the morning. Anything that forces the shift of cortisol to be produced in the morning and then suppressed during the evening, and then melatonin comes up and cortisol disappears pretty much completely until around maybe 5 a.m. in the morning, it starts to rise again. Anything you can do to stimulate that, that is important if you think you have a flipped circadian rhythm. So John said his wife and he are the team. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. But the things we talked about, John, back then to help you with your sleep, if you had to say that your sleep has improved, 1 being the worst and 10 being the best improvement, tell me how you're sleeping now that you're doing some of the things that you're doing. I got to ask a question from Rick, and then we got one from Amit Ram in Israel. Has anyone made a video that you like that might help more of us be comfortable with injecting something such as GHRP6? Injecting myself scares me. You know, there are videos on YouTube. There are videos on YouTube that'll show you how to do an intramuscular injection with an aspiration first. There are videos on YouTube that show people how to inject subcutaneously, because don't forget, you know, insulin is all the rage today. I mean, it's astonishing to me when I'm walking through a parking lot and I see an insulin syringe on the floor. 10 years ago, I would think a junkie. But now it's somebody's grandmother or somebody's father who had to take a shot at dinner time and accidentally dropped it going to the car. He was probably going to put it in his little Sharps bottle, but he didn't get there. It's like, it's the number of people that use insulin syringes today. It's just unbelievable. So I would say to you that if you do a real brief search of on YouTube for how to inject your insulin, you will find the information that you are seeking. So this question comes from Amit Ram, all the way from Israel. He says, what's the deal with EAAs, essential amino acids? I understand their advantage for being complete and super fast, but why not simply take some whey 50 minutes earlier when convenient? Their peak will last the whole training session. So when lacing the post-workout with leucine, there are EAAs in the blood already. Just think ahead, or am I missing something? So I'm not sure if this question originally was a result of me posting my new pre-workout, which I want to share something with you. And one of the things I want to do today is share something with you that I've discovered. So I did a post the other day about my new pre-workout, and my new pre-workout actually includes ketones, protein, and designer carbohydrates, amongst other things, some amino acids. And so I posted that the other day, and I think that this was a result of that post, I'm assuming. But I'm going to answer it both ways. First of all, the only time someone would use EAAs over a straight whey protein powder, Amit, would be if calorically they don't want those calories before their workout. That's the only logical reason. You're absolutely right. The only time you would take EAAs before a workout is if for some reason you're working at a time where you can't have any more food right now, you just ate an hour ago, whatever, you want to preserve the metabolic machinery turned on to being anabolic, and that's where they could serve you. Otherwise, having whole proteins pre-workout is definitely much better. There's no doubt about it. In the case of my drink, because I'm using Thrive is already fortified with essential amino acids because that's how it is in breast milk. And then I've got whey, and I've got casein, and I've got colostrum. So adding that to my pre-workout drink or post-workout drink is going to solve a lot of problems for people because it has all the bases covered. But this whole thing about pre-workout drinks that I posted the other day is very, very intriguing to me. I actually was communicating with Ron Penna yesterday from Quest, and I shared with him that I believe the future of pre-workouts will, in fact, be inclusive of carbohydrates, fats, protein, and ketones. Okay? And here's my logic, simple. It's simple logic. In fact, it'll even stand up to I think the influences of evolutionary pressures on human beings. So we have one camp over here that's arguing about ketones is all you need for your workout. We have another camp over here saying, no, you need carbs for your workout. We have people who say using a fast-acting whey or dairy protein pre-workout is a good thing. We have all these people divided in these camps, right? They've got this thing. And if you look at it from a 30,000-foot view, you can say to yourself, why do we need to argue about which is best when, in fact, all are best? And the reason for that is this. Our bodies are hybrids, and that's part of the reason why we have survived as long as we have. If we run out of foods that produce glucose, our bodies can burn fatty acids. If fatty acids are too slow and hard, because, by the way, it's harder to burn fatty acid than it is to glucose. It takes more oxygen. It's definitely metabolically more expensive to use fatty acids as an energy source. But our body does do it. And then there's ketones, right? The ketones are great, too. So you have glucose, you have fatty acids, you have ketones. You have amino acids, which can do a variety of things as far as being energy substrates and or influence the actual metabolic process of utilizing other energy substrates. So doesn't it make sense if we are hybrids and that different organ systems prefer different things? Why are we choosing with our drink, instead of letting all the tissue in our body choose on demand what it prefers? Some tissue may, like the brain doesn't like fatty acids. It's hard for them to metabolize. It likes glucose, it likes ketones. And I'm willing to bet at certain times it likes glucose more than ketones and ketones more than glucose, given certain circumstances. Why am I going to dictate what my brain has access to as far as a fuel substrate when it knows best and it knows on demand in the situation at the nanosecond that it wants to make the decision? So my theory is this: the future of pre-workout products will not negate all of these wonderful substrates that all of our body loves them all at different times for different reasons based on different tissue. Why not put it all in your body and go train as hard as you can? Because nothing in your body is being told, well, no, there's none of that. Is that what you want? We didn't get any of that at the store. No, we don't have that. No, it's saying, hey, yeah, you want ketones, you want fatty acids, you want glucose, you need some amino acids. And think about it from an evolutionary perspective. If abundance tells the body, wow, you're in really, really high clover, your life is good, your environment is good. Having all these things in our body is sending that signal. Because remember, muscle is metabolically expensive to make and to maintain because it burns calories. So the body has to be convinced that there's abundance in the environment. It's not going to put on a bunch of muscle that can't contribute to protecting from starvation, because that's what fat does. It's not going to build a bunch of muscle if it thinks that there's going to be starvation in the future. And how do you tell the body that it's in a world of abundance? You give it everything it wants. I don't mean become a fat, obese pig You give it everything it wants as a fuel substrate. It goes, wow, the environment is abundant. This is wonderful. We have ketones when we need them. We have protein. We have amino acids. We have fatty acids. We have glucose. Wow, isn't life great? I predict that this is the future of pre-workout nutrition. This is, and I've discovered it, and I got to tell you something. I'm training harder than I've ever trained before. I'm going to be 60 next year. I like saying that better than I'm 59. Isn't that weird? Am I trying to get old faster? But I can tell you that this is absolutely going to be the future of pre-workout nutrition. You'll see. Let's see what questions we have here. Rick says, I totally forgot that injecting yourself is not an underground act, given how many people are using insulin. It's easily fine. Yes, YouTube has. When I first started intramuscular injections, I went to YouTube and watched a video on it. They've got videos there on how to inject in your calves, how to inject in your shoulders, how to inject in your hips, how to inject in your glutes, how to inject in your quads. You know, when you're going into a muscle, you have to aspirate. You have to pull back on the plunger just a little bit. And if blood comes into the plunger, you're in a vein. You don't want to inject. You want to get someplace outside of the vein and inject. And so you just usually move the needle to another place and inject it back in with the blood and everything in it. It's your blood. You know, it's not like your blood. But sub-Q is easy. You grab a piece of skin and you put what is tantamount to an eyelash into your skin and you inject and you're done. There's no risk of hitting a vein, hitting a nerve, or any of that stuff. Nick Guggs, I guess this is when we were talking about Rebecca Schmidt's anxiety thing. I found CBD helps a lot of those people as well, balancing the system. Yeah, but you know what my problem with CBD is? It's my same problem that I have with caffeine. And here I am. I'm a caffeine abuser. We know that. We've talked about it, you know. Is when you start relying on these external constituents to correct something that shouldn't be happening. We're now no different than the pharmaceutical industry. You know, we're masking. I think that meditation is not sexy. CBD oil is definitely sexier. But I believe a lot of people who suffer from anxiety, if they actually really got down to it and learned how to meditate and did it for some period of time, some weeks, they would see all of their problems go away. And then if they're on a trip and they run out of CBD oil, they don't freak out and go, oh my God, I'm out of my CBD oil. I'm going to get all nervous today and I'm going to have a crappy day. And no, not at all. One of the reasons that I want to stop the caffeine abuse is, and I haven't been able to, it starts with a bad night's sleep. I haven't slept good in 3 nights. And I went and trained legs today and I torqued the muscle. I shouldn't have gone to the gym today. I should have taken one more day off. I know that. And something else that's very interesting. So some of you may remember that I did a show about this, about biorhythms. And I know it's silly, right? So I was really not strong today. Like when I only went up to 11 plates on my leg press today because I did not feel it. And the 11 plates felt heavy. That's 11 each side. So I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm going to try to get it as close to the camera. But this is my biorhythm. Let's see. It doesn't. You can't really see it. That sucks. Okay. So biorhythm is a physical, emotional, and intellectual waveform that starts at your birth. And as a result, you can track it. And every one of these has a different number of days in its cycle, just like a woman's menstrual cycle has 28 days. Well, you're not supposed to make any harsh decisions when you're intellectually low. And you're not supposed to make any decisions about anything relationship-wise when you're emotionally low. And you're definitely not supposed to go in and try to train like an animal when you're physically low. Well, I'm at negative 89 physically, negative 90 emotionally, and negative 99 intellectually. That equals I'm going to go in and hurt myself today. And I really think that's why I pulled a muscle in my glute, and it'll probably bother me for the next couple days, and then it'll be gone. But So after I do stupid stuff like this, I go and look at the app. I don't look at the app first. So it's not like as though I have it in my head that, I'm going to hurt myself today. I was driving home from the gym and I thought, man, I haven't had any injuries. I feel good. I'm getting stronger, And then I went to my Biorhythm app and I'm like, oh, dude, I'm like at the lowest you can be on everything right now. I shouldn't be doing anything like this. Elisa must not be listening because I am still on the air. Yes, Elisa. Let me just text her back. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. I really like Biorhythm. If nothing else, I'm actually thinking about using Biorhythm to create my peak and deloads. Peak and deloads. That's what I'm going to do. I actually am going to try that and see what happens. I'll experiment with that. Anybody got any questions out there that they want me to answer? I got some heat from someone because of my analogy last week of alimony being the same as slavery. And they wanted to remain anonymous. Oh, look who's here. Elisa's here. Hi, Elisa. Look at that beautiful face. But I still stand on my reasoning about that. So I didn't back down, but I just wanted to let you know I did get some heat about that. My little rant. Anybody got any questions? No? Boy, this is a pretty boring come at me, bro. I'm going to have to start bringing my own material, I guess. Start doing stand-up. I think we got Rebecca's question answered. We got Doug Salomone's question answered. It looks like, I could be wrong about this, but I think Amit Ram just messaged me or commented about, let's see here. Oh, no, he shared my post. Yeah, so we got Amit Ram's question answered in Israel, so that was pretty cool. How about any question? Anybody want to know anything about me? Did I shower today? No, I didn't. I came straight from the gym. How about that one? Look at my hair. When the color starts to wear out, you can see it looks like my scalp, but it's not my scalp. It's actually the gray under the bottom. Oh, you can see my gray beard. Look how gray my beard is. I could play Santa Claus. And that's probably what my head looks like too. I got nothing else if you guys have no questions. So I guess, Amit Ram said he will listen later. Good, yes. Am I losing my hair? My hair has gotten thinner over the years. Absolutely. My hair has definitely gotten thinner over the years, but no more than my father's hair did. What I got is that my father didn't have is this here receding hairline. I really think that was from excessive androgen use back in the day. I really do. I kind of feel like that probably pushed it. Maybe it wouldn't have gotten that far back until I was 70. So Amit Ram asks, is there anything for hair loss? There is. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. There is, in fact, a peptide that was discovered that appears to actually make hair follicles come back from the zombie stage of sleep. And there are some copper-based peptides that appear to have the ability to regrow hair. These are still in the experimental stage. You can buy them from a lot of the peptide companies, believe it or not. And quite frankly, they appear to work, but they have to be injected with an insulin syringe. And as a result, you need to have someone do it for you. It's not something you can easily do yourself. I would imagine it's a little painful. And but yes, there are some peptides. Very, very hopeful. I don't think I'll ever use them. I talked about this before. I'm not that vain about my hair. My father had a head of hair like this, and I just figured it was going to be mine too, and I really don't care about it. But there are some people out there that are pretty vain. So Rick Pack is helping me out. Rick Pack is fantastic. So he went out and looked for questions. He says, Carmela Cierzo, who lives in Canada, and I'm sorry I didn't have this question ready. I do remember her sending it, but it's hard for me to get all these questions from different places and bring them to one thing. She said that she's thinking about the show that we did with the bee charmer. And she's thinking about the fact that there's 22 amino acids and plus tons of other stuff in bee pollen. She was thinking about replacing her amino acid capsule consumption with bee pollen instead. I actually think it's a great idea. And I'll tell you why. I if you would have asked me this question before I did that interview with Stuart Dietz, and if those of you haven't heard it, Amit Ram said it was the most fascinating interview he's ever heard about bees and honey. And that takes a lot because Amit's a very intellectual guy. So I was flattered by that. And that means I asked some good questions, I would imagine. So that's why I was flattered by it. But anyway, I was always worried about bee pollen because I thought that all of the pesticides and herbicides that bees come in contact with would be in the bee pollen. But he explained that the bees actually get rid of any bee pollen that has any kind of toxins in it. And they barricade it off in some other area of the hive. And so the bee pollen that is gathered, that the bees are using, is actually okay. And so I'm rethinking bee pollen because, as Carmela points out, it's not only a fantastic source of amino acids, but it's also a fantastic source of B vitamins and some minerals. And probably a lot of things that we don't even know about yet. So, yes, Carmela, I think it's a great idea. And I actually am going to start looking for a new source of bee pollen myself. Dr. John Parker asked, he said, I just tossed my remaining bottles of Primal D away. Did Jeff Galini offer a timeline for a new product? What's the difference? Okay, great question. Yes. So Dr. J doesn't do anything until it's ready to be done. I, on the other hand, want to rush. So in the middle, we're finding that I predict we will have testing samples for Primal D within the next couple weeks. And once we test it, we will share the test results, but I'm very positive about it. So what's the difference? Well, we used a hydroalcoholic base before, and it had some dimethyl sulfoxide in it, DMSO, and this was really pharmaceutical grade. This is the same DMSO that they use for cancer drug delivery, so it doesn't have the smell. The problem was that when people sprayed it on, depending on how vigorously and how quickly they rubbed it, if it evaporated quickly, they got less vitamin D. If it evaporated slowly, they got more vitamin D. And this was too unpredictable, and that's why we pulled it off the market. The new Primal D vehicle will be a lecithin-based organogel, much more like Flowgel was back in the day. Flowgel's still available. It will be more of a lotion or cream feel, and as such, you can rub it in all you want because it's going to dry at the same rate no matter what you do, and it's going to have additional penetration enhancers that will make it a very, very high-performing vehicle, delivery vehicle. What will the final dose of vitamin D3 be per pump? That will be determined by the testing we do. So the bottom line is this. More predictable delivery, higher delivery rate, more predictable delivery across a larger number of people, better cosmetic qualities, and it has a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of DMSO in it because we wanted that sulfide. We wanted that sulfide, especially for D3, because as Dr. Stephanie Seneff said on our show, on my show many times, that she believes that it's the sulfated D3 that is more valuable than just the D3 itself. And she's published studies about that. So we wanted that sulfide in there because we wanted it to be a donor to cholecalciferol sulfate. And so that's why we kept a little bit in there, just a little. But the delivery is going to be much higher, much more predictable, and it's going to have better cosmetic quality. So when you rub it in, it's not going to leave your skin dry or anything like that. People are going to really like it. So that's really the gist there. Let's see, Amit Ram. Yeah, intellectual. Amit lives in Israel, and I think that we have more Israel listeners in Israel because of Amit, because he shares the show all the time. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, let's see here. Rick Pack had gotten something else for me. So Bobbie Cooper wants to know latex or sheepskin. Neither, man. I've been on testosterone since 2007. I ain't got no fishies anymore. I'm safe. I've been fixed without having to be fixed. But and the truth is, as a young man, I never liked them anyway. I don't know. I don't think any guy likes them, right? I really don't. I don't know any guys who look forward to putting one on. And I got to tell you something else. Sheepskin always grossed me out because to me it looked like the casing that my grandfather used to use to make sausages. Yeah, I'm not down with that. Not at all. So John Peaks has a question here that I want to get to. He's asked about BPC 157 protocols. This is really good. So BPC 157 is fast becoming one of the most popular peptides in the world. It will outpace melanotan 2, which by itself is a huge peptide used by more mainstream people. BPC 157 can help you with gut issues. It can help you with soft tissue issues. It's a really sexy compound. Its name, Body Protection Complex. It's like, oh, this is good for my entire body. I got to get some of this. The best way to use it, I mean, it is, Adele Musa and I did a show last year about BPC 157. Last year, all these people coming out of woodwork now, and they're like, oh, BPC 157. Last year, we did a show on this. I think it was March of last year, actually. So the best way to use it is to inject it. You can take it orally, but it's really hard to meter out because the BPC 157 that's available on the internet is for injection. So if you pop that bottle open and pour it out, and that says it's 5 milligrams, and you add that to some liquid, once you, if you add it to, if you use the right thing to reconstitute it, like a sodium based or a bacteriostatic water that is pH balanced properly, it will last a week. But how do you meter it out with an eyedropper? I mean, it's just so much easier to just inject it under the skin. 300 to 500 micrograms once to twice a day, depending on the severity of your personal situation. If you're using it so that you don't get tendinitis, so that you don't have problems, 300 micrograms a day, once a day is fine. If you have an injury like tendinitis or bursitis or a mildly ruptured tendon or something like that, you're going to want 500 micrograms, a half a milligram twice a day, systemically. I use it daily. I'm out of it right now. It's usually part of my post-workout stack. My post-workout stack consists of this. 2 IUs of growth hormone, 1 milligram of thymosin beta-4, 300 micrograms of BPC 157, 3 IUs of oxytocin. Am I missing anything? And occasionally some IGF-1E, mechano growth factor, occasionally. And that's something that I inject only on days I work out and only post-workout, right after I get out of the gym, generally in the car. So it's a stack that's worked for me. And I think that if the oxytocin does some amazing things. We did that show. I don't know if you remember the show that we did on oxytocin and aging muscles, but it makes muscles young again. And you don't really need a lot. Let's see here. No, we don't like them. I don't know what that was an answer to. Oh, I know what it is. Latex or sheepskin. Yeah. Bobbie Cooper. Thank you, Bobbie. And Rick, thank you for being so active and making me feel like it's not just me. So Dan Carlson says, have you looked into molecular hydrogen? I can't say that I have. If you want to type a little quick blurb about what we're talking about here, is this something that's in water? Is it, I mean, there is a value to reducing certain things to their smallest size, like micronizing certain amino acids, for instance. Molecular hydrogen, I don't know. Is it, I'm assuming it's a gas, right? And so you're breathing it or you're infusing it in water. I'm sure he's typing, so we'll give him a chance to respond. So Nick got a chuckle out of something. It must have been the question about lambskins or sheepskin. I just gave away a brand name, right? Sheepskin versus latex. Yeah. So Dr. John Parker, we got that question answered. We got the questions about hair answered. There are some interesting peptides out there that are probably going to be around very soon as it relates to hair. An interesting fact, unless you've been identified with having androgen-based hair loss, 2/3 of all men that were examined, and it was a pretty large group. This is an old study. You can find it in PubMed, I'm sure. The study is probably from 2007 or 2008, and they did look at how blood flow affects hair loss. And it does, and that makes sense, right? Because if you turn the irrigation system off to field number 4, everything in field number 4 is going to die. And they found that 2/3 of all men who had male pattern baldness, regardless of whether or not there was an indication of androgen sensitivity, 2/3 of all those men had very poor blood flow to the scalp. Now think about that. There's a lot of guys out there that just improving blood flow to the scalp would change their hair growth. How do you do that? Well, obviously manipulation, get scalp massages, brushing your hair, brings blood to the surface. And you have to do it consistently for months. You can't do it once and then go look and go, oh, yeah, look, I got hair growing. Or no, I don't. I mean, you got to do this consistently for months. But I'll tell you something else. 880 to 890 nanometer near-infrared LEDs. Make a little baseball cap with them, get a battery pack, put it on, and wear it for a half hour every day. 880 to 890 nanometer LEDs have been approved by the FDA for treating diabetic wound healing and diabetic neuropathy, because that wavelength actually releases a lot of nitric oxide from hemoglobin. And we know what nitric oxide does, right? It causes blood vessels to expand. Well, if you use the 880 to 890 nanometer LEDs in a hat and wear it for a half hour a day, you are releasing a ton of nitric oxide that slowly is going to get some of those blood vessels that have kind of shrunken and gotten small to open up. And you got to do it again for months. Start making those inroads back out into the scalp. But I actually tried to get a guy on the show years ago, and I don't know if he died or what happened because his website just became dormant, but he actually had a massage technique that he gave money-back guarantee on his book that it would stimulate new hair growth. So there's something to that discussion about blood flow and hair loss. So Elisa Profumo says castor oil helps with hair growth. That's right. That's right. It's a very, very powerful influencer of new hair growth. And guess what else Elisa would say if she could talk immediately? In women, iron deficiency is associated with hair loss. Women are very neglectful about paying attention to getting iron. A lot of women don't like to eat beef. And as such, you have to pay more attention. Women have to pay more attention to their iron intake because low iron equals thinning hair in women. It's not always androgen dependent, unless a woman has PCOS and she has hyperandrogenemia and she's starting to grow hair on her face and lose it on her head. That's a different story. So Xavier Willis says, I'm sure you've answered this on a show, but I've only just started to listen again. What's your thoughts on MK677 versus GHRP6 and GHRP2 with non-DAC CJC? Okay, I got a lot of opinions here. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. I don't like MK677, and I'm going to tell you why. And I actually used a little bit last night, just a little bit, probably like 10 milligrams, because I thought it would actually help me sleep, because it usually makes me sleep, makes me lethargic during sleep, but it didn't work last night. So I actually have a couple bottles in my bedstand. So, you know, it's not like as though I've never used it, so I'm going to bash it. Dr. William Seeds, who comes on my show and talks about peptides. We just did a show about thymosin alpha-1. No one's talking about it. You hear about it here. He sent me a study that shows that MK677 the research that they did on elderly people with MK677 showed that MK677 caused the receptor to actually recede because it stimulates the receptor too long, and the receptor actually disappears, and you have a downregulation of the receptors responsible in the pituitary to produce the growth hormone that they're stimulating. Because it works too long, it works for hours. And GHRP6 and GHRP2 don't. Now, anecdotal evidence also says that MK677 may be associated with anxiety, because all the people who crapped out of that study crapped out because they had anxiety. Now, could the anxiety be directly affected by the MK677? Sure. Could the MK677 be binding to some other receptors that we don't know about that is stimulating an anxiolytic effect? Sure. Or could the MK677 be causing such an increase in growth hormone that the conversion to IGF-1 is happening and it's clearing blood sugar out of these people's bloodstream? Sure. But the bottom line is MK677 is, and I just realized you said MK477. I think you mean 677. It is actually, it may actually cause anxiety. Okay, I got lost because I got thrown by that 477. GHRP6, GHRP2, and CJC non-DAC. First of all, I fucking hate it that people call the peptide that should be growth hormone releasing hormone or growth hormone releasing factor or modified growth releasing factor CJC without DAC. It's not CJC without DAC. It's modified growth factor 1 through 29 if it doesn't have the drug affinity complex. And if it does have the drug affinity complex, it's CJC 1295. So I hate that people do this, that they use this term inappropriately. But to answer your question, this is a much better approach to producing growth hormone for you. GHRP6 in the morning because it stimulates more cortisol production. GHRP2 later in the day because it doesn't stimulate near as much cortisol production. And 100 micrograms of GHRP6 and 100 micrograms of modified growth factor 1 through 29, and you'll have a fantastic pulse. In fact, this is not my idea. The guy who was most famous for promoting this science is a guy who we only know as Dat Be True. And some of you may remember him from the boards. But Dat Be True is the guy who broke the news that GHRP6 or 2 with modified growth factor 1 through 29 produced a much higher, more predictable pulse of growth hormone than anything else, than imiperilin or any of those. So that's the way I think you should go. Also, if you talk to Anthony Roberts, he will tell you that MK677 will make you fat. Everybody who uses it gets fat. And there may be some validity to this. It may not be all supposition. Because remember, this is a ghrelin. This is a hunger hormone. And if you're constantly hungry, then your body thinks that you're starving, no matter what you're eating. And if your body thinks it's starving, it's more likely to make fat out of what you eat. So I think that MK677, in my humble opinion, is a mistake. Now, CJC 1295, you can run it for a couple, 3 weeks at a time, but you got to stop because, once again, it keeps its foot on the gas pedal a little too hard. And growth hormone likes the pulse. Growth hormone likes the pulse. It doesn't like this constant thing. But I do think that that could work as well. I hope I answered that question okay. All right, so let's see here. Mark Carter, thoughts on this product for hair growth? I don't know. I'd have to look at it. I can't get to the link right now on the show, so I can't answer that. Yes, he did mean MK670. Thank you, because I actually thought I forgot the nomenclature was using the wrong terminology. But anyway, yeah. So that and I'm a big fan of peptides, and I think that they're great if they're used right. And I would tell you GHRP6 in the mornings, GHRP2 later in the day, and modified growth factor 1 through 29. And why only 100 micrograms? Because anything over that is the saturation dose. So you want to saturate the receptors. You don't want to have a lot of excess running around the blood. This is why GHRP6 will make you hungry if you use too much. If you get hungry from GHRP6, you've used too much. One of the things that Dat Be True discovered was that all men needed was 100 micrograms of each, modified growth factor and GHRP. All women need is about 50 micrograms of each. And they'll experience all the rise in growth hormone without any potential excess floating around in the bloodstream. And that's what it's all about, right? The lowest effective dose. You save money that way as well. Wow. We're done. And we've answered a bunch of questions, and hopefully everybody enjoyed what we had to talk about. And please, if you want to get questions to me, the easiest way to do it, if you can't be here live, if you could be here live, it's great if you could post it, because then I put the bubble up and I read it from the bubble and everything goes great. But if you have a question and you want to get it to me, just email it to onair@superhumanradio.net. And I'll have everything in one place, and then I can create little images and post them up and stuff like that. So anyway, that's it. That's all I've got. And I want to thank everybody for turning out. We had quite a few live listeners today. Lots of interaction. I got to thank Rick Pack for having my back. That rhymes. Rick Pack had my back. And going out there and finding questions that I did not see. So, all right, look, see you next week. Thank you for being here today. And don't forget, Tuesday, Bobbie Cooper's coming on. We're doing a show called Drop and Give Me 20. You're not going to want to miss this show. I promise you. This is a show that can actually make a difference in your training, your strength, and your physique. So hopefully you can make that. That'll be Tuesday. All right, we'll see everybody next week with Superhuman Radio. Have a good weekend. Laugh a little.